Formula One is a sport of fractions. A fraction of a second, a fraction of an inch, a fraction of a decision. Each one capable of rewriting the history of the sport. What if Senna had never left McLaren? What if Ferrari had signed Hamilton instead of Mercedes? What if a single mechanical failure never happened? Some of these moments would have changed the course of the sport forever. Others could have created an entirely different Formula One than the one we know today. Today, we're looking at the greatest what-ifs in Formula One history, alternate timelines where legends rise, dynasties fall, and the sport we know is unrecognizable. Let's start with perhaps the greatest what-if in Formula One history. What if Ayrton Senna had survived the 1994 San Marino Grand Prix? Ayrton Senna is one of the greatest names in Formula One history, and he's arguably the best driver of all time. A three-time world champion known for his raw speed, fearless driving, and his incredible battles and rivalries on the track. By 1993, his time at McLaren was coming to an end. The team had just lost its Honda engine deal and was struggling to keep up with the Williams at the time, who had the most advanced car on the grid. Senna made the difficult decision to leave McLaren for Williams in 1994, chasing what he believed was his best chance at another title. But as we all know, that move led to a horrible tragedy. At Imola during the San Marino Grand Prix, Senna crashed at the Tamburello corner, losing his life in an accident that changed Formula One forever. But what if that never happened? What if Senna had survived? What if he fought back and won the 94 title? Would Schumacher's rise to dominance have been delayed or even stopped? How different would Formula One history look today? Let's find out. Senna's 1994 season began with high hopes and immediate setbacks. Williams had just dominated the 1992 and 1993 Formula One seasons with their advanced active suspension and their driver aids. But these technologies were now banned for 1994, and the new Williams FW16 was unstable and difficult to drive at the limit. But of course, this is Ayrton Senna, and even with a struggling car, he took pole position in all three of the opening races. Yet, despite this unmatched one-lap performance, he never finished a single race. Meanwhile, Michael Schumacher in his Benetton won all three rounds, taking an early 30-point lead in the championship. For round one in Brazil, Senna spun out while chasing Schumacher as he was just pushing the car too hard. And in the following Pacific Grand Prix, a disastrous turn one collision with Mika Hakkinen crashing into his rear took him out of the race. And finally, in that infamous third round at Imola, a weekend that would become one of the darkest in Formula One history, Senna secured his third consecutive pole position, but the atmosphere was already heavy. During Saturday's qualifying session, Roland Ratzenberger tragically lost his life in a high-speed crash, sending shockwaves through the entire Formula One grid. Concerned for driver safety, Senna, being one of the sport's most senior and respected figures, took it upon himself to lead discussions about improving Formula One's safety standards and became the head of the new Grand Prix Drivers Association. Come race day, Senna made a strong start, maintaining his lead over Schumacher. However, an early safety car was called after a start line crash, slowing the pack for several laps. When racing finally ended up resuming on lap 5, Senna immediately pushed, trying to build a gap to Schumacher behind him. Then on lap 7, disaster struck. Senna's car suddenly veered off at the Tamburello corner, failing to turn into a corner traveling at 310 kilometers an hour. He went straight into the unprotected concrete wall. The impact was devastating. The crash ended his race, but more tragically, it ended his life. Formula One had lost one of its greatest champions, and the sport would never be the same again. But again, what if Senna survived? How would the rest of the 94 season have played out? And could he have still won the championship? If Senna had walked away from Imola, he would have been massively behind Schumacher in the standings. But the season was far from over. Senna had a terrible start, but was clearly much faster than his teammate Damon Hill in the same car. The FW16 was unstable early in the season, but later on, it was refined into race-winning machinery. Damon Hill, Senna's teammate, ended up winning 6 races that season and took the title fight to Schumacher, losing by just 1 point after their infamous Adelaide crash. If Hill could come that close, surely Senna would have done even better. If Senna had survived or avoided that crash entirely, he would have likely still won the 1994 title by outperforming Hill, becoming a 4-time world champion. The 1994 season could have been an incredible battle of Senna versus Schumacher. But what about 1995 to 1997? Would Senna have dominated as well? Well, in 1995, Schumacher and Benetton looked unstoppable. However, the Williams FW17 was actually the fastest Formula One car that year, but the Benetton B195 had a better driver and often better race strategy, leading to Schumacher's 95 title win. If Senna was in the Williams instead, he would have likely won the championship even in 1995. Even though Schumacher was excellent in that Benetton, the Williams car was faster, and with Senna behind the wheel, I don't think he would have been toppled. If we move to 1996 and 1997, these years were where Williams dominated. With Hill and Villeneuve winning back-to-back titles, it's hard to imagine Senna not winning both championships in a superior car. This means Senna could have ended his career with Williams, having won 4 straight titles from 1994 to 1997, giving him 7 total championships and letting him retire as the undisputed greatest of all time in 1997. However, there's also another what if here. What if he didn't retire in 97? There was always talks of Senna moving to Ferrari, just as Schumacher did in 1996. If that had happened, how would Ferrari's future have changed? Would Ferrari still have dominated from 2000 to 2004, but with Senna at the wheel instead of Schumacher? Would Schumacher have never actually gone to Ferrari? These are all questions we will never really know the answer to, but they open an entirely different possibility for Formula 1's history. Either way, it's fun to think about who would have won those 5 straight titles from 2000 to 2004 if Senna was still around. If Senna had lived though, the consequences and effects would have rippled through F1 overall. To start, Schumacher's career would likely have changed. He likely wouldn't have 7 titles, as he probably wouldn't have won between 94 and 95. And he may have had a different fight when he was with Ferrari. But in addition to this, Senna's legacy would have been even greater. With 6 or more likely 7 titles, Senna wouldn't just be an icon, he'd be the clear statistical greatest of all time. And this also means that Hamilton's era would have looked different. Instead of chasing Schumacher's records, Hamilton would have likely been chasing Senna's. However, the biggest change would have definitely been to Formula 1's safety. Senna's death was a major catalyst for major safety enhancements in Formula 1. If he had survived, someone else would have likely had to pay the price for that change to happen. Unfortunately, in motorsports, history shows us that tragedy is the thing that often forces progress. Now, moving on from Ayrton Senna, I wanted to discuss the story of Robert Kubica. In Formula 1, the difference between glory and heartbreak often comes down to a split second. A wrong move on track, a poor strategy call, or sometimes a decision made outside the cockpit entirely. And few stories embody that more than the story of Robert Kubica. At the start of 2011, Kubica was on the verge of greatness. He'd already proven himself as one of the fastest and most naturally gifted drivers on the grid. He was dominating his teammate at Renault, and behind the scenes, Ferrari had already lined him up as their next star driver. He was set to partner Fernando Alonso in 2012, with a real shot at becoming the Formula 1 world champion. But then, everything changed. A single moment away from F1 shattered those dreams, and with it, one of the biggest what-ifs in the history of the sport was born. What if Robert Kubica never had his 2011 rally crash? To understand just how big this was, we first need to go back and understand what a talent Kubica really was. Robert Kubica's talent was obvious from a young age. Growing up in Poland, a country with no F1 heritage, he had to fight harder than most to reach the top of the sport. After dominating the junior categories, he became the BMW Sauber test driver in 2006 and got his big break mid-season when Jacques Villeneuve left the team. He made an immediate impact at the 2006 Italian Grand Prix, his 3rd race ever. He finished on a podium in 3rd place, the first Polish driver to ever stand on a Formula 1 podium. In 2007 at the Canadian Grand Prix, he had a crash that should have ended his career. At over 185 miles per hour, Kubica's car launched into the air and hit a wall and disintegrated. The impact was so violent that everyone feared the worst. But in a testament to his resilience, he walked away with just a sprained ankle and a concussion. But 2008 is where he almost became champion. In 2008, Kubica and Sauber were title contenders. He took his first Formula 1 victory at the Canadian Grand Prix, leading a 1-2 finish for the team, and by mid-season he was leading the World Championship against Lewis Hamilton and Felipe Massa. But BMW stopped developing the car, shifting focus to 2009, and Kubica's title hopes slowly faded. Then, when BMW left in 2009, Kubica joined Renault for 2010, and he ended up making an impact there, making an underperforming car look much better than it was. He dragged it to podiums in Monaco, Belgium, and Australia, regularly fighting the Red Bulls and the McLarens. By mid-2010, Ferrari had seen enough, and they had already signed a pre-contract with Kubica to replace Felipe Massa for 2012. He was about to get the biggest opportunity of his whole career, a Ferrari seat, alongside his good friend Fernando Alonso. Everything was falling into place. The years of grinding, proving himself in weaker cars, outperforming his teammates and expectations, it was all finally paying off. But then, it all came crashing down. February 6, 2011, just 3 weeks before the start of the Formula 1 season, Kubica entered the Ronda d'Andorra rally in Italy. On a routine stage, disaster struck. He clipped the barrier at high speeds, but this crash wasn't a normal one. A section of Armco guardrail speared straight through the car, penetrating the cockpit and horrifically almost severing his entire right arm. He was trapped in the wreckage for over an hour, bleeding heavily. When he finally got out, his injuries were catastrophic. Multiple fractures, nerve damage, and doctors fighting to save his hand from amputation. For Kubica, the dream of racing for Ferrari in 2012 was gone. Just like that. He spent months in surgery and rehabilitation, while Renault moved on without him. Ferrari was forced to rethink their entire lineup, stuck with Felipe Massa. The man who was supposed to be Alonso's next great teammate, a potential world champion, was simply fighting to be able to use his hand again, let alone drive a Formula 1 car. But what if the crash never happens? What if in 2012, Robert Kubica stepped into the Ferrari alongside Alonso? Well, it's easy to forget just how strong Ferrari was that year. Alonso took the title fight to the final race, despite having a weaker car. But while Alonso dragged every ounce of performance out of the Ferrari, Felipe Massa was nowhere to be found. He scored just 122 points compared to Alonso's 278. Now, imagine replacing Massa with Kubica. Kubica was never a number 2 driver. He was an aggressive, precise, and just incredible driver. And he had the reputation for outperforming the machinery he was given. If he'd been given the second seat for Ferrari that year, he would have almost certainly scored more points than Massa, and that's where the what if gets interesting. Vettel ended up winning the 2012 championship by just 3 points, and with Kubica in that Ferrari taking points off the Red Bull or fighting Vettel for wins and helping Alonso here or there, does Vettel still win? Does Alonso finally get that 3rd championship? Or does Robert Kubica finally become world champion? I believe history would look incredibly different. But what about after 2012? If Kubica was in Ferrari's long-term plans, they might not have ever signed Sebastian Vettel in 2015. It might have been Kubica, and Kubica and Alonso may have stayed together for years, reshaping Ferrari's future. Kubica could have become the driver to take the fight to Hamilton during the hybrid era, but there's no way to know. What we do know is that 2013 would have been a struggle, as Red Bull and Vettel dominated. And from 2014 to 2016, Ferrari wasn't really title worthy. And even if Kubica did stay long term, would he have still been in a prime position when Ferrari did return to form in 2017 and 2018? I don't really think so. Formula 1 is a sport built on fine margins. A single moment can change the course of history. And sadly in 2011, fate dealt one of its cruelest hands imaginable. But against all odds, Kubica returned to Formula 1. In 2019, Williams signed Kubica as a driver, but sadly the car was uncompetitive and his injuries meant he was no longer the driver he once was. He left Formula 1 at the end of the season, admitting it was the wrong time and the wrong place. Afterwards, he did end up transitioning into endurance racing, and he eventually landed a seat in the hypercar class with Ferrari. In 2024, he ended up winning the 6 Hours of Austin, marking a major milestone in his post-Formula 1 career. Kubica never got his Formula 1 title. He never got the Ferrari seat that he'd so much deserved. But after everything, the crash, the comeback, the pain, he's still racing today. And maybe that's what makes a true champion. So now we've discussed Senna and we've also discussed Robert Kubica, but there's one more driver that I wanted to discuss today, and it's an interesting story. Formula 1 is a demanding sport, both mentally and physically, but one driver seemed to never lose hope even when his teammate was Lewis Hamilton. And in 2016, he did what almost no one expected, and he walked away as the driver's champion. That man was Nico Rosberg. For years, Rosberg had been in the shadow of his childhood rival Hamilton. They were teammates at Mercedes, but more than that, they were bitter competitors. Every race, every lap, every qualifying session was a battle of inches between the two. And in 2016, after an exhausting season-long war, Rosberg finally beat Hamilton and became the world champion. And then he was gone.
I've decided to end my Formula 1 career.
5 days after winning the title, Rosberg shocked the Formula 1 world by retiring from the sport. Just like that, one of the most intense rivalries in Formula 1 was over. But what if it wasn't? What if Rosberg never retired? Would Formula 1 have changed? Would he have defended his title? And more importantly, would Ferrari and Sebastian Vettel have stolen a championship from Mercedes? Rosberg's retirement left Mercedes scrambling. They needed a replacement, and they ended up with Valtteri Bottas, a clear number 2 driver. This allowed Lewis Hamilton to focus on his title challenge without an internal threat. That stability contributed to Mercedes securing both the drivers and the constructors championships in 2017. But if Rosberg had continued, things would have played out very differently. Early 2017 belonged to Sebastian Vettel. He led the championship for the first 12 rounds. But with Rosberg still in the picture, it wouldn't have just been Hamilton chasing him. It would have been both Mercedes drivers constantly taking points off each other and fighting Vettel. Instead of a two-way fight, we could have had a full-blown three-way title battle. By mid-season, Mercedes had the stronger package, and Hamilton began clawing back the points, capitalizing on Ferrari's every mistake. But with such fine margins, all it would have taken was a Rosberg win here, a Hamilton DNF there, or a few extra Ferrari podiums, and suddenly Vettel is champion. For 2018, it was a season much like the year prior. On paper, the Mercedes was the fastest car. They were the team to beat. Hamilton was at the top of his game, and let's be honest, Rosberg probably would have struggled to dethrone him in equal machinery. But once again, the real winner of this alternate timeline might not have been Rosberg, but it would have been Sebastian Vettel. In the real 2018, Sebastian Vettel started off strong, winning 5 of the first 13 races. But after a crucial mistake at the German Grand Prix, crashing out from the lead, there was a clear turning point. Hamilton took control, and from there, Vettel's title challenge collapsed under the pressure. Now, add Rosberg into the mix, just like 2017, Mercedes would have had no clear number one driver. With Rosberg and Hamilton potentially robbing points off each other, Ferrari wouldn't need to be perfect, they'd just have to be consistent. And in a season decided by fine margins, maybe those extra few points would have been enough to tip the balance in Vettel's favour. Even if Rosberg stayed, I'd still place my bets on Hamilton winning both 2017 and 2018 though. But Rosberg's presence could have changed the dynamics just enough for Ferrari to still one championship away from Mercedes. And more than that, it could have delayed his retirement, keeping him in the sport until 2019 or 2020. Would Ferrari have broken Mercedes' dominance? Would Vettel have 5 titles instead of 4? Would Rosberg have ever gotten his second championship? Again, we'll never know for sure, but one thing's for sure, I think Mercedes got lucky with Rosberg retiring, because if he hadn't, history might have looked very different. Even if Rosberg stayed past 2018, one thing is clear, his time at Mercedes would have had an expiration date. Beating Hamilton once is hard enough. Doing it again, potentially, that's nearly impossible. Eventually, something would have had to give. Although Mercedes may have been seemingly lucky to get rid of Rosberg, Rosberg was the one driver who could seemingly do the unexpected constantly. Taking a pole position from Hamilton here, a win there, whatever it might have been, if the circumstances were right, he always did what you didn't expect. And that's the beauty of Formula One. It's a sport built on fine margins, split-second decisions, and stories that could have played out very differently had the circumstances been different. There are countless more what-ifs in Formula One's past. Let me know your favourite in the comments. And watch my video on screen on the tragic tale of Ronnie Peterson, Formula One's super sweet.